mean when they talk about active versus passive when talking about mutual funds. What they're talking about is the management style. So with an actively managed fund, you have a manager whose job is to try to pick investments that will beat some benchmark index. And so if they are a large cap growth fund, they're going to buy stocks within that large cap growth category, and they're going to try to buy the ones that they think will do best over time, whether their time period is short or long term. And that sounds great, right? What is a passively managed mutual fund? Passively managed mutual fund is where instead of trying to figure out which stocks to own, they own all of the stocks in that universe in some manner, whether it's based on market cap, where they have more of the bigger companies and less of the smaller companies, or whether it's the equal weighted, where they just buy all of the stocks in that universe and in equal amounts. And when you think about that and you think, well, I'm just going to buy, if you have a choice of whether you own all of the stocks or you're going to pick a manager who is just going to pick the best ones, it seems like a no-brainer to go for the actively managed mutual fund. Seems being the operative word there. The thing is, actively managed funds charge more in fees and expenses. And so a typical index fund might be bought for 0.1% or 0.2% per year, and they're not going to do a lot of buying and selling, so there's not a lot of turnover costs, and there's not a lot of costs in the different bid and ask spread when they're buying and selling stocks, so they can keep their costs very low. The actively managed funds need to pay managers and analysts, and it's expensive, and they also do a lot more buying and selling, and so there's more turnover costs and portfolio costs. And so over time, passively managed funds beat actively managed funds more often than not, and usually about 2/3 of them. So about 2/3 of actively managed funds over longer periods of time, 1, 3, 5, 10 years since inception, don't beat the benchmarks that they're trying to beat. So you think that you're going to be paying for a mutual fund and you're going to pay for this active manager and his expertise and somebody who's out there on Wall Street and he's got this team of analysts and he's a really smart guy or gal, and you think that I could do this and they're going to beat the fund, they're going to beat the benchmark. I mean, the problem is that there's a lot of them. There's a lot of smart people buying and selling different stocks or bonds or whatever it is, and they all compete against each other. And so it's really hard for any of them to stand out from the crowd. And what happens is they basically fight with each other to see who does best, and then as a whole, they do worse than the index by the aggregate amount of fees that they charge that are above what the index would be. And so while it's a nice theory of buying an active manager to beat the market, it hasn't worked in practice, not at least in the last 40 years. There's no reason to think it'll work going forward. The much better idea is to figure out how much you need of the fund of an asset class. Like, does it make sense to invest in it, and then try to buy that cheaply and efficiently, and you'll probably do better. Thanks.